Zoe woke up to a strange weight on her left hand. Before she could even open her eyes all the way, she felt cold metal pressing against her skin. When she finally managed to focus, her heart stopped for a second. A diamond ring was glittering on her ring finger. Huge, clearly expensive, and completely unfamiliar. "What?" she whispered, her voice rough and shaky. She sat up sharply, and the second she did, a headache exploded behind her eyes like fireworks. The room spun around her for a few seconds. When it finally settled, Zoe looked around, and panic started creeping through her veins like ice water. This wasn't her bedroom. This wasn't her tiny apartment in Chicago. She was in a luxury suite, the walls lined with marble, heavy velvet curtains in deep wine red, and enormous windows pouring in sunlight. The furniture looked like carved antique wood, probably worth more than her entire yearly salary as a teacher. "Where am I?" she murmured, trying to summon any memory from the night before. Fragments started surfacing in her mind, blurry, like photographs out of focus. She remembered the airport. She remembered the excitement. Her best friend, Amanda, shouting something about a bachelorette weekend in Las Vegas. There had been drinks, a lot of drinks, neon lights, music so loud she could feel it vibrating in her chest, a casino, more drinks, and then, nothing. Total blackout. Terrifying. Zoe looked at the ring again. Her hand was trembling. It couldn't be a real diamond. It had to be something cheap, some bachelorette party joke. But deep down, she already knew the stone was real. The way it caught the light, the way it sat heavy on her finger, it was a genuine diamond. Panic took over. She threw off the silk sheets and realized she was wearing nothing but black lace underwear she'd never seen before. Expensive. Definitely not hers. "Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God," she repeated like a mantra, jumping out of bed. Her legs were unsteady, but she made it to the massive full-length mirror on the other side of the room. She looked at her reflection and froze. Her brown hair was a mess, her mascara smeared under her eyes, and on her neck there were red marks. Not painful, but visible enough to suggest a kind of intimacy she couldn't remember. "No," she whispered, feeling her stomach climb into her throat. "No, no, no." She searched the room frantically for her clothes. She found her dress from the night before, a simple black cocktail dress, tossed over a velvet armchair in the corner. Beside it were her heels, one standing upright, the other tipped on its side. As she stepped closer to grab them, she noticed something else. A man's suit. Elegant, perfectly tailored, black as midnight. A white shirt folded carefully over the back of a chair. And on top of it all, a silk tie, loosely coiled around the armrest. Someone had been here. Someone had slept in that bed with her. Zoe's heart started slamming against her ribs. She turned sharply, staring at the enormous bed again, as if it might reveal secrets she couldn't recall. The sheets were rumpled on both sides. 2 pillows showed clear signs of use. "Who is he?" she whispered to the empty room. Before she could think any further, she heard a sound coming from behind the bathroom door across the suite. Running water. Someone was in the shower. The panic turned into pure terror. She needed to get out of there, right now. Zoe grabbed her dress and tried desperately to put it on, nearly tripping in the process. Her fingers were shaking so badly, she could barely get the zipper up in the back. She shoved her feet into her heels, not caring that one of the straps was twisted. She needed her purse. She needed her phone. Her eyes swept the room. There, on the nightstand on the other side of the bed, sat her small black purse, the edge sticking out past the table. She moved toward it, but the moment she took her first step, the bathroom door opened with a soft click. Zoe froze mid-step. Steam rolled out of the bathroom, warm and soft, carrying the smell of expensive soap and something else, something masculine, clean, almost hypnotic. And then he walked in. Time seemed to slow down. The man was wearing nothing but loose black sweatpants riding low on his hips. His chest was bare, and Zoe couldn't look away. He was tall, much taller than her, with broad shoulders and a muscular build. But it wasn't his height or his shape that made her forget how to breathe. It was the tattoos. They covered most of his chest and arms. Intricate, dark designs that looked like artwork carved into skin. Roses twisted around his right forearm, blending into what looked like Gothic lettering in a language she didn't recognize. On the left side of his chest was the outline of a lion, majestic and threatening. And along his ribs, barely visible in the shifting light, were surnames. Italian surnames. Zoe swallowed hard, feeling her throat close up. The man looked up, and their eyes met, and only then did she really see his face. It was striking. A strong jaw shadowed with stubble, cheekbones that looked sculpted by an artist, full lips that carried something sensual even in their seriousness. But it was his eyes that truly held her. Dark, so dark they were nearly black. And in that darkness, there was something dangerous, something controlled, something that told her this was not an ordinary man. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted into a faint, almost amused smile. "Buongiorno, Mogli mia," he said, his voice deep and velvet, thick with an Italian accent. Zoe narrowed her eyes, trying to process the words. Her Italian was rusty at best, but one word cut through her mind like a knife through butter. "Mogli, wife? What did you just say?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The man tilted his head, his dark eyes studying her with something between amusement and something far more intense. "I said, 'Good morning, my wife,'" he repeated, this time in English. His accent gave the words an almost musical quality. Zoe felt the room spin again. "Wife?" she repeated, her voice rising. "What do you mean, wife?" The man took a step toward her, his movements smooth and controlled, like a predator's. Zoe instinctively backed away until her heels hit the edge of the bed. "You don't remember?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. There was clear amusement in his voice now. "I don't remember anything," Zoe shouted, feeling tears sting her eyes. "I don't remember anything. Where am I? Who are you? What happened last night?" The man stopped a few steps away from her, crossing his muscular arms over his chest, the tattoos shifting with the movement. For a moment he just stared at her, as if weighing how much he should say. Then he sighed. "My name is Luca Russo," he said calmly. "And you're in my suite at the Bellagio, Las Vegas." Zoe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Luca Russo. That name sounded familiar, very familiar. But from where? Luca continued, his voice calm, almost indifferent. "As for what happened last night." He paused, and a shadow of a smile crossed his lips. "We got married." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" was all she managed to say. Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and white, a marriage certificate. He handed it to her. Zoe grabbed the document with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the text, but the words blurred together. Then she saw it. Her signature. Her real, legal signature, right next to his, written in elegant, confident handwriting. Luca Antonio Russo. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. No, this is impossible. I wouldn't do this. I never would." "You were very drunk," Luca interrupted, his tone still calm. "We both were. We met at the casino. We talked. You drank more. I suggested a small wedding chapel nearby. You thought it was a great idea." Zoe felt her knees buckle. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the marriage certificate still crushed in her hands. "This can't be real," she murmured. "This is a nightmare. It has to be a nightmare." Luca watched her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened, just slightly. "It's not a nightmare," he said quietly. "But I understand why you'd feel that way." Zoe looked up at him, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? If you knew I was drunk, why did you let it happen?" For a moment, Lucas said nothing. His jaw tightened, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Regret, maybe guilt. But before he could answer, his phone rang somewhere in the room, sharp and insistent. Luca turned and walked to the nightstand where a sleek black smartphone sat buzzing. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed instantly. Tension filled his shoulders. He answered. "Yes," he said sharply. There was a stretch of silence during which Zoe watched his jaw clench tighter and tighter. "No, Nora," he growled. "I'll handle it later." He hung up without saying goodbye and set the phone down harder than necessary. When he turned back to Zoe, there was a new intensity in his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. "But not here. Get dressed. Meet me in the living room in 10 minutes. Before Zoe could protest, Luca walked out of the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click, and she was alone. Alone with the marriage certificate in her hands. Alone with the ring on her finger. Alone with an impossible truth. She was married. and her husband was a stranger. Zoe stayed under the shower in the luxurious bathroom for 15 minutes, letting the hot water run over her skin, hoping it would somehow wash away the absurdity of the last few hours. But when she finally stepped out and wrapped herself in a soft white robe hanging behind the door, reality was still there, waiting for her like a shadow. She was married. She had married a complete stranger, Luca Russo. The name kept echoing in her head, insistent and familiar, but she couldn't place where she knew it from. Maybe she'd read it somewhere, in the news, online. She opened her purse and, with relief, found her phone. The screen showed 23 missed calls from Amanda and countless text messages. "Where are you, Zoe? Answer your phone. I'm starting to worry. If you don't call within the hour, I'm calling the police." The last message had been sent 30 minutes ago. Zoe quickly typed back, "I'm okay. Long story. I'll call you later." She couldn't talk to Amanda right now, not until she understood what she'd gotten herself into. She put her black dress back on from the night before. It was all she had, and pulled her hair into a low ponytail. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale and frightened, but at least more sober than an hour ago. She took a deep breath and walked out of the room. The suite was even more impressive in daylight. High ceilings, enormous windows overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, furniture that looked pulled straight from an Italian palace. Everything screamed money. Serious money. She followed the marble hallway until she reached a spacious living room, and there he was. Luca stood by the window, looking down at the city. He was fully dressed now, black trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoos on his forearms. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a luxury magazine, but there was something raw about him, something dangerous no camera could ever capture. In his hand, he held a glass of whiskey, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "Sit," he said, without turning around. Zoe hesitated for a moment, then sat on the edge of a cream-colored leather sofa, hands in her lap, fingers fidgeting nervously with the ring still resting on her finger. She tried to take it off earlier, but it fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Luca finally turned and walked over, sitting in an armchair across from her, his posture relaxed but something intense burning in his eyes. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't really a question. "I have a million questions," Zoe replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "Let's start with the most important one. Who are you really?" Luca lifted the glass to his lips and took a sip, his eyes never leaving her face. "I told you. Luca Russo." "That tells me nothing," she snapped. "Who are you? What do you do? Why do you have this suite? And why?" Her voice trembled. "Why would you agree to marry someone you don't even know?" For a long moment, Luca said nothing. He set the glass down on the glass table between them with a soft click. "I'm a businessman," he said finally. "Family business. Import. Export. Investments." "What kind of import and export?" Zoe pressed. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Various kinds." That wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. Zoe felt frustration building in her chest. "Look, I'm not an idiot. I saw your tattoos. I saw the surnames on your ribs. I heard your phone call. I'm a teacher, not an FBI agent, but even I can see something doesn't add up here." Something crossed Luca's face. Respect, recognition. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his dark eyes studying her with such intensity that she had to fight the urge to look away. "Fine," he said quietly. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth." He paused, as if weighing every word. "My family runs several commercial ventures. Some legal, some in the gray zone. And I'm expected to take over leadership of those ventures." Zoe's heart pounded harder. "Gray zone," she repeated. "What exactly does that mean?" Luca sighed. "It means my family has connections. Connections that run deep. And to take control of those connections, of the company, of everything my family has built for generations, I have to meet a certain condition." "What condition?" "I have to be married." The words hung in the air between them. Zoe blinked. Luca leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "My father died 6 months ago," he said, and a shadow of pain crossed his voice. "Before he died, he changed his will. According to his final wishes, I can only take over the company if I'm married, and stay married for at least 6 months." Zoe shook her head, trying to process it. "Wait, so this whole thing was staged?" "No," Luca said sharply. "Meeting you wasn't planned. The marriage wasn't planned. I was drunk. You were drunk. Things spiraled out of control. But now, he paused. It works out conveniently for you, doesn't it? Zoe's voice was bitter. Luca didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Yes, he said finally. It works out for me. Zoe felt anger bubbling in her chest. So what now? We just stay married? Pretend this is real for 6 months, and then, what divorce? She stood up abruptly, fists clenched. You're unbelievable, she said. Do you really think I'm just going to go along with this? That I'll ruin my life for your convenient little business requirement? Luca rose too, his height towering over her, but he didn't step closer. He stayed there, calm and unshaken. No, he said quietly. I don't expect you to do it for free. Zoe narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a check. He handed it to her. Zoe took it with trembling fingers and looked at the amount. $250,000. The world spun. What is this? She whispered. Your payment, Lucas said. For 6 months as my wife. All I need is for you to live with me, show up to a few family events, convince everyone we're a real marriage. After 6 months, you get the divorce, this check, and you can walk away, no questions asked. Zoe stared at the number on the check, her mind spinning. $250,000. It was more money than she'd made in 4 years of teaching. Enough to pay off every student loan. Enough to stop worrying about bills. Enough to start over. But at what cost? I can't, she whispered, pushing the check back toward him. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. This is insane. Luca didn't take the check. He just kept watching her. You have debts, he said quietly. Zoe froze. What? Student loans. $62,000. Plus credit card debt. Plus rent you're 2 months behind on. The blood drained from her face. How do you know that? Luca's expression was unyielding. I'm a businessman. Researching people is part of my job. Anger flared back up, hot and sharp. You investigated me? You dug into my life without my consent. I married you, Luca replied calmly. I needed to know who I was dealing with. You had no right. I have every right. You're my wife. The words hit her like a slap. For a moment, they stood in silence, the tension between them thick and heavy. Then Luca sighed. Look, he said, his tone softening slightly. I know this is insane. I know it's not normal. But this is your chance to get out of debt, to start fresh. All you have to do is pretend for 6 months. Pretend what? Zoe asked bitterly. That you love me. Something crossed Luca's face, something too fast to catch. No, he said quietly. Just pretend you're happy. That's all I need. Zoe looked away, her mind racing. It was too much. All of this was simply too much. But then she thought about her apartment in Chicago, the bills piling up on her desk, the sleepless nights spent worrying about how to cover everything. $250,000 could change her life. And if I agree, she said slowly, still not looking at him. What are the rules? She heard Luca exhale. It was relief. You'll move into my suite here in Vegas. You'll wear the ring. You'll come to family dinners and events. In public, we act like a married couple. And in private? She asked finally, looking at him. His dark eyes met hers. In private, you can do whatever you want. You'll have your own room, your own space. I won't ask anything of you that you're not willing to give. Something in the way he said it made her cheeks burn. She looked away. And after 6 months, I just leave? After 6 months, you get the divorce and the money. End of story. It sounded so simple. So clean. But deep down, Zoe knew nothing in life ever was. She thought of Amanda, of her family back in Chicago. What would she even tell them? How could she explain this? And yet, $250,000. Freedom. I'll give you 24 hours to think about it, Lucas said, as if reading her mind. If you say no, I'll arrange a quick divorce. No questions, no problems. You can go back to your life like none of this ever happened. And if I say yes? Luca extended his hand. Then we have a deal. Zoe looked at his outstretched hand, strong, with scars across the knuckles. The hand of a man who'd done more than just sign papers. This was madness. Absolute madness. But when she looked into his dark eyes, she saw something beyond just a business transaction. Something lonely. Something desperate. And she thought that maybe, just maybe, they both needed this kind of madness. She didn't shake his hand. Not yet. 24 hours, she repeated. Luca nodded and lowered his hand. 24 hours. Zoe took a deep breath. I need my own room. I need to call my friend. I need to think. The door at the end of the hall, on the left, Lucas said, pointing. It's yours if you accept. It's already furnished. You can stay there tonight either way. Zoe nodded, not trusting her own voice. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. She turned back. He stood there, silhouetted against the panoramic windows of Las Vegas behind him, and in his eyes there was something almost fragile. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for how all of this happened. I didn't plan it. But now that it has, I want you to know I won't treat you like a business transaction. You deserve better. The words hit her unexpectedly. For a moment, she saw something beneath the surface, something human, something real. Then it vanished, hidden again behind his usual mask of control. Zoe didn't answer. She simply turned and walked to her room. Her heart was pounding, her mind spinning with questions she had no answers for. When she closed the door behind her, she leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. She looked at the ring on her finger, then at the phone in her hand. 24 hours to make a decision that would change everything. And deep down, even though she didn't want to admit it, she already knew which decision she'd make. Because sometimes the craziest decisions are the ones we need. And sometimes strangers are exactly what our lives need in order to change. For months had passed. For months since Zoe said yes to Luca's proposal. For months since her life changed beyond recognition. She stood now on the balcony of the suite in Las Vegas, watching the sun set over the Strip, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and violet. The wind moved softly through her hair, longer now, healthier, thanks to the luxury products she could finally afford. The ring still glittered on her finger. She'd gotten used to its weight. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like not to wear it. Almost. Behind her, through the open sliding doors, she could hear Luca's voice, deep, authoritative, speaking Italian on the phone. He sounded irritated. Lately he often did. The business, whatever it really was, seemed to be getting more complicated. Zoe closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The first few weeks had been the strangest. Living with a stranger, pretending by day that they were a real married couple, learning to navigate a world she'd never understood. A world full of expensive restaurants, private meetings, people who looked at Luca with a mix of respect and fear. But somewhere along the way, somewhere between the second family dinner and the third month of living together, something had changed. They'd stopped being strangers. She wasn't sure exactly when it happened. Maybe it was when Luca brought her Italian coffee at 3 in the morning, when he found her crying over bills she could finally pay. Maybe it was the first time she heard him really laugh, actually laugh, over a silly joke she made at breakfast. Or maybe it was when they kissed for the first time. No, she corrected herself mentally, the second time. Technically they'd kissed during the wedding ceremony, but neither of them remembered that. The first kiss they actually remembered had happened 6 weeks ago. They'd been at a family dinner, one of those formal, tense gatherings with the Russo clan, where every word was weighed and every glance meant something more. They sat at a long table, surrounded by Luca's aunts, uncles, cousins, all watching, all judging. Luca's mother, an elegant woman with steel gray eyes and perfect posture, sat at the head of the table. She'd looked at Zoe with suspicion since the very first meeting. Tell me, Zoe, Mrs. Russo said. Her English was flawless but cold. How long did you know my son before you married him? It was a test. There was always a test. Zoe felt Luca's hand find hers under the table, squeezing gently, a quiet signal of support. Not long, Zoe answered honestly, because she'd learned that the truth, or her version of it, worked best. Sometimes it only takes a moment to recognize someone who's going to change your life. Mrs. Russo narrowed her eyes. A romantic perspective, but not a practical one. Before Zoe could respond, Luca cut in, his voice calm but firm. Mama, Zoe is my wife. She deserves respect. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mrs. Russo looked at her son, then back at Zoe. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the older woman nodded. You're right, Luca. Forgive me, Zoe. It wasn't a sincere apology, but it was enough. After dinner, when they got back into the car, a sleek black Maserati Luca drove with effortless ease. Zoe finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Your mother hates me, she said, resting her head against the headrest. Luca glanced at her sideways, the corner of his mouth lifting. She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't trust you yet. What's the difference? A big one. Trust can be earned. He shook his head. Hate is forever. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the neon lights of Las Vegas flickering through the windows like colored ghosts. Then Luca parked outside her building, but he didn't get out right away. He just sat there, his hands still gripping the wheel. Thank you, he said quietly. Zoe turned toward him. For what? For handling tonight. I know it's not easy. My family is complicated. Zoe smiled weakly. That's a gentle way of putting it. Luca finally looked at her, and in his dark eyes there was something warm, something real. Seriously, you did well tonight. My mother doesn't apologize often. The fact that she did means you're starting to win her over. Something in the way he looked at her made her heart race. They were close in the cramped space of the car. She could smell his cologne, woodsy, masculine, familiar now after months of sharing space. Luca, she whispered, not entirely sure what she meant to say. But she didn't have to say anything. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was slow, deliberate, as if he were giving her the chance to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, her hand rising to rest against his cheek, feeling the roughness of his stubble under her fingers. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing harder. Luca rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. This wasn't in the contract, he murmured. I know, Zoe whispered. It complicates things. I know. But neither of them pulled away. And from that moment on, everything changed. The kisses became more frequent. At first, only during public events, a quick goodbye kiss in front of the family, holding hands during walks. But soon they started happening in private too. In the morning over coffee. At night watching TV. The lines they'd drawn between pretending and truth began to blur. Zoe knew she was falling for him. And it terrified her. Because what would happen when their 6 months ran out? What would happen when the contract ended? She'd asked him that question a week ago. It had been late at night. Neither of them could sleep. They both often had insomnia. They were sitting in the living room, Luca with his laptop, Zoe with a book she wasn't actually reading. Luca, she said finally. He replied, not looking up from the screen. What happens in 2 months? This time he looked up. There was caution in his eyes. What do you mean? Our contract ends in 2 months. I get the divorce and the money, remember? Something crossed his face, too fast to catch. I remember, he said quietly, and pressed his lips together. Luca closed the laptop and set it aside. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What do you want me to say, Zoe? I want to know what you feel. Is this real for you? Am I real for you? Or is it still just business? Luca looked at her for a long time, some internal battle raging behind his dark eyes. Then he stood and walked to the window, his back to her. I fell in love with you, he said quietly. Zoe's world stopped. What? He turned, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. I fell in love with you, he repeated. I didn't plan it. I fought against it. But it happened, and I don't know what to do about it. Zoe stood up, her heart racing. Luca, my world isn't a good world, he interrupted. It's not flowers and rainbows. It's danger. It's violence. It's things I wouldn't want you to be part of. That's not your decision. I should protect you, he said, his voice rising. I should keep you away from all of this. But I'm too selfish, because I want you to stay. I want this to be real. Tears filled Zoe's eyes. It already is real, she whispered. Luca closed his eyes as if her words caused him pain. Don't you understand? I understand more than you think, Zoe said, stepping closer to him. I know your business is dangerous. I know people fear you. I know not everything you do is legal. He opened his eyes and looked at her. And that doesn't scare you? It scares me, she admitted. But you know what scares me more? The idea of leaving. The idea of going back to Chicago and pretending none of this ever happened. That you never happened. His jaw tightened. Zoe reached up and touched his face. I love you, she said. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened. But it's true. And if you love me too, then we'll find a way to make this work. For a long moment, Luca just looked at her, a storm of emotion burning in his eyes. Then he pulled her against him and kissed her, deep, desperate, as if he were trying to pour every word he couldn't say into that single kiss. And that night, something between them changed. They stopped pretending. What had been fake became real. But the truth, as Zoe was about to learn, came with a price. Now, standing on the balcony, Remembering that night, Zoe heard Luca finish his phone call. His footsteps approached the balcony. She felt his arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "How much everything has changed," she said, leaning into him. "Good or bad?" She turned in his arms, looking into his dark eyes. "The best possible way." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile reserved only for her. "Good," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Because I have news for you." "What is it?" "I finalized all the paperwork. The company is officially mine now." Zoe's heart leapt. That means our deal is over," he finished. 6 months have passed. You got what you wanted." He paused, and his eyes turned serious. "But now I want something more." Zoe swallowed hard. "What?" Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a different ring than the one she already wore. This one was simpler, more delicate, but somehow more beautiful. "I want to start over," he said quietly. "I want us to get married again. Not for business. Not for money. Just for us." Tears filled Zoe's eyes. "Luca, I know my world isn't perfect," he continued. "I know it'll be dangerous. But I swear I'll do everything in my power to protect you. To build a life where we can actually be happy." He looked at the ring, then at her. "You'll have to give some things up," he said quietly. "I know. The crime, the illegal business. All of that has to go." Luca nodded slowly. "Maybe not right away, but it has to go." "I already started," he said. "Did you know that?" It was true. She'd seen the way he'd been turning down certain meetings, transferring certain dealings to others. It was a slow process, but it was real. "It won't be easy," she warned. "Nothing worth having ever is." Zoe smiled through her tears. "So are you asking me to marry you?" "No," Lucas said, smiling too. "I'm asking you to be my wife. My real wife. Forever." Zoe's heart felt so full she thought it might burst. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her as the sun set behind them, Las Vegas glittering in the distance like a sea of stars. And somewhere in that embrace, the act ended and the truth began. 3 weeks after the engagement, everything fell apart. Zoe woke at 3 in the morning to the sound of a door slamming shut. She sat up sharply in bed, her heart hammering. Beside her, Luca's side of the bed was empty, the sheets still warm. "Luca," she called, her voice trembling in the dark. For a moment there was silence. Then she heard voices coming from the living room, loud, aggressive, speaking rapidly in Italian. One of the voices belonged to Luca. The others were unfamiliar, threatening. Zoe slid out of bed, reaching for her robe, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the belt. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She crept silently to the bedroom door and opened it just a crack, enough to see a slice of the living room. What she saw made her blood run cold. Lucas stood in the middle of the room, wearing only pajama pants, his torso tense as a wire. In front of him stood 4 men, all dressed in dark suits, all with guns clearly visible at their belts. One of them, an older man with a scar running down his left cheek, was speaking sharply to Luca. "You can't just walk away, Luca," he growled. "The family won't accept it." "I'm leaving gradually," Luca replied, his voice low but firm. "I've already transferred most of the business." "Most," the scarred man cut in. "You think that's enough? You think the families in Chicago and New York are going to wait patiently?" Zoe felt her stomach twist into a knot. Families. Chicago. New York. Words that sounded pulled straight out of a gangster movie, and were now her terrifying reality. Lucas stepped forward. "I have agreements." "Agreements mean nothing," another man shouted. "You're weak, Luca. Ever since that girl showed up, you've gone soft." The younger man, with a snake tattoo coiling around his neck, added coldly, "Weakness gets you killed in our world. We can't afford it." Time slowed down. Zoe watched as the man's hand reached for his holster. She saw the flash of metal in the dim light, and then she heard the roar of gunfire. The shot was so loud Zoe screamed without meaning to. A second shot. A third. A fourth. "Luca!" she shrieked, running out of the room without thinking. The world exploded into chaos. Suddenly the suite was flooded with people. The front doors burst open, and agents in bulletproof vests poured in, shouting orders. "FBI! Hands up! Drop your weapons!" Everything happened too fast. Shouting, crashing, flashing lights. Zoe saw one of the men collapse to the floor. then another. A third tried to run, but was immediately subdued. And then she saw Luca. He was by the sofa, one hand pressed against his arm, blood dripping between his fingers, but he was alive, breathing. Luca. Zoe ran to him, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to examine the wound. "Oh my God, Luca." "Hey," he said, his voice weak but trying to smile. "I told you to stay in the room." "Idiot. You're the idiot," she sobbed, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stupid, stupid idiot." A tall woman in a Navy FBI jacket rushed over. "Medics," she shouted. Then she knelt beside Zoe. "Mr. Russo, we need to take care of him. Please step back." But Zoe didn't want to let go. She couldn't. Luca touched her face with his bloody hand. "Zoe, I'm sorry. Don't apologize," she sobbed. Just be okay. Please." The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, gently but firmly pulling Zoe back. She watched helplessly as they worked on Luca, bandaging the wound, preparing him for transport. The agent put a hand on Zoe's shoulder. "Mrs. Russo, you're coming with us to the hospital. Your husband needs surgery, but the doctors will do everything they can." Zoe nodded, unable to speak. In the ambulance, watching the paramedics hook Luca up to various machines, she felt reality hit her with full force. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a movie. This was real life, real bullets, real blood. And the man she loved had nearly died. At the hospital, time lost all meaning. Zoe sat in the waiting room, still in her robe stained with Luca's blood, watching seconds turn into minutes, minutes into hours. Agent Martinez, that was how she'd introduced herself, sat beside Zoe, quietly explaining what had happened. "Your husband has been cooperating with us for 3 months, she said, "giving us information on the family structures, the illegal operations. He knew trying to leave would be dangerous, so he came to us for help." Zoe stared at her, shock and anger mixing in her eyes. "He knew for 3 months and didn't tell me." Martinez sighed. "He was protecting you. If you'd known too much, you would have become a target. It's safer this way." "Safer?" Zoe laughed bitterly. "My husband just got shot. How exactly is that safer?" Before Martinez could answer, the doors to the operating room opened. A surgeon walked out, pulling off his mask. Zoe jumped to her feet. "How is he?" The doctor smiled weakly. "He was lucky. The bullet went through his arm, but didn't hit any major arteries or bones. He'll need recovery time, but he should make a full recovery." Zoe felt her legs give out. Martinez held her up. "Can I see him?" "Soon. We're moving him to post-op. We'll let you know when you can go in." Another hour of waiting. Another hour Zoe spent alone with her thoughts, and those thoughts were dark. Gunshots. Blood. FBI. Secrets. This wasn't the life she wanted. This wasn't the world she wanted to live in. Finally, a nurse came for her. She led Zoe down a long, sterile hallway to a small room. At the end of it, Luca lay in a hospital bed, pale but conscious, his left arm bandaged and immobilized. When he saw Zoe, he tried to smile. "Hey." Zoe stopped in the doorway. For a moment, she just looked at him. This man who had become her entire world. This man who had nearly died. Then she started crying. She walked to the bed and sank into the chair beside it, covering her face with her hands. "Zoe." Luca's voice was soft. "Zoe, look at me." But she couldn't. She couldn't look at him without seeing the blood, without hearing the gunshots. "You lied to me," she whispered through her tears. 3 months cooperating with the FBI, and you didn't tell me. I had to protect you. I don't want your protection." She lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. "I want a partner. I want someone who trusts me enough to tell me the truth." Luca closed his eyes. "If I had told you, you'd have been in more danger. And now that those men know who I am, now I'm safe." She didn't respond, because they both already knew the answer. Zoe stood up, her body trembling. "I can't do this, Luca," she said quietly. "I can't live in a world where every single day I have to wonder if you'll come home alive. I can't live with that kind of fear." He opened his eyes, panic flashing in their darkness. "Zoe." "No. I need time." She cut him off. "I need to think." "Zoe, please." But she was already leaving. She walked out of the room, down the hospital hallway, out into the cold Las Vegas night, and just kept walking, tears running down her cheeks, her heart breaking into a million pieces, because she loved him. God, how she loved him. But sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes love couldn't survive the darkness. For months later, Zoe stood in her small apartment in Chicago, staring out the window at the winter landscape. Snow fell softly, blanketing the city in white. She'd gone back home, gone back to teaching, gone back to her old life. But nothing was the same, because her heart was still in Las Vegas. During the first weeks after she left, Luca called every day, sent messages, begged her to come back, to give him a chance. But Zoe never answered. She couldn't. Every time she heard his voice, she saw the blood, heard the gunshots. Gradually, the calls stopped. The messages stopped coming. And Zoe convinced herself it was for the best. She told herself she'd made the right decision. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. Amanda visited often, bringing food, trying to cheer her up, but even her best friend couldn't fix the emptiness in Zoe's heart. "You should call him," Amanda said one night, the two of them sitting in Zoe's living room with wine. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I call, I'll go back. And if I go back," Zoe shook her head. "I can't live in that world, Amanda. I can't." Amanda took her friend's hand. "But can you live without him?" Zoe didn't answer, because the answer was too painful. That night, alone in her empty apartment, Zoe let herself look at the ring she still wore. She'd tried to take it off dozens of times, but she never could, because deep down, despite the fear, despite the pain, she was still his wife. And she still loved him. She reached for her phone. Maybe just one call. Maybe just to hear his voice. But before she could dial the number, her phone rang. Unknown number, Las Vegas area code. Zoe's heart pounded harder. "It's Luca." She answered, her voice trembling. "Hello? Is this Zoe Russo?" The voice was female, official. "Yes. I'm calling from University Medical Center in Las Vegas. Your husband, Luca Russo, was admitted to the hospital an hour ago. He's been shot." Zoe's world stopped. "What?" "He's currently in surgery. He's in